Shalom, everyone. Hi, I'm Diane Augustine, and I thought I would help those of you who are curious and want to know what a blood moon is, and what a Shemitah is, and what do they mean, and how will it affect you? Um, well, first of all, a blood moon is a lunar eclipse, and a tetrad is when four successive blood moons fall an equal distance apart over a period of time. Now, we have a tetrad occurring, and they do occur frequently in history, but not frequently in history if you lay them over a Hebrew calendar. You will find that the only time they've happened historically, and this will be the eighth tetrad, historically, is when something significant has happened to Israel. And you can learn more about that by going to the WorldNet Daily site and checking out Pastor Mark Biltz's Blood Moon series. Anyway, so this past spring at Passover, we had the first of a blood moon tetrad fall on Passover, and this fall we will have a second of a blood moon tetrad occur on October 8th. Now, after the first one fell, Operation Protective Edge was started shortly thereafter as Israel began defending itself against the onslaught of rockets from Gaza. With the second blood moon, this is September 30th, I'm recording this, I expect that the attacks will resume and perhaps even increase, perhaps from the north. The United States is arming so-called Muslim moderates in order to battle against ISIS. Well, I'm sorry, this is going to go backfire. This is not going to go well. Islam historically has formed a coalition whenever they have a common enemy, and they do have a common enemy in Israel, and they're going to be going after and attacking Israel, most likely together. There are terror tunnels under the north of Israel, just as there were the south. The goal of jihadi Islam has always been to wipe Israel off the face of the map. If you will go to Memory TV, it is a site that monitors Arabic TV and videos and translates them into English, so you know what they're saying to each other in the Muslim world. Now, historically, the United States of America has been blessed and protected as long as it has served as one, a refuge for the Jewish people, and two, a protector for Israel. September 11th was a warning to the United States to turn back toward God, or God's hand of protection would be withdrawn fully. In the near future, there will be attacks on the USA with beheadings, roving gangs of thugs. They're going to attack and steal from and burn businesses. They're going to kill, maim, and destroy anyone who opposes them. General raping and pillaging. Look back in history. This is how the Muslim faith is. This is what they call people to do. They call people to force them to submit to Allah. If you are a Christian or a Jew, you will have a choice. And if you don't, the Quran says off with your head. Okay? Now, there are people who interpret the Quran more moderately, but when it comes down to it, and you've got these extremists ruling the roost, well, they're going to want to save their own necks, and they're just going to go along with them, just like the people of Germany went along with Hitler. The silent majority doesn't matter. All right, so what's going to happen? Just like Ferguson, Missouri, all over the USA, but much worse. In Ferguson, those who owned guns and stood on their porches to let the gangs know not to mess with them or their homes were arrested, okay? Your weapons will be taken away from you. The thugs were allowed to loot, and our president wants this. He will institute martial law, he will suspend elections, and he will remain in office as a dictator. You don't think so? I'm sorry. Everything he's been doing as far as laying out all of these executive orders, he have just been right in line exactly with Adolf Hitler did prior to World War II. Okay, so I don't know when this is all going to take place, but let's look back historically with the Shemitahs, what has happened in the USA and why you should be concerned about it. September 17th of 2001, the stock market crashed, one of the largest crashes it ever had experienced to that date. It was associated with September 11th. Of course, we had halting of all the airlines for several days. Anyway, 2 days earlier, before September 17th, the Lehman Brothers, one of the nation's largest financial firms, completely collapsed. Bankruptcy, okay? September 17th happened to be Elul 29 on the Hebrew calendar. Likewise, September 29, 2008 marked the next big crash. It too was Elul 29 on the Hebrew calendar. Rabbi Jonathan Cahn observed this connection, and you can look at his book, which is the Shemitah, and learn about it a little bit more in depth. He prefers not to speculate on what, if anything's going to happen to America on September 13th, 2015, which will be the next Shemitah. It also happens to occur on Elul 29, 7 years from the last stock market crash. It's a time when debts are to be forgiven, and land in agricultural communities in ancient Israel was to be given a rest. It's a blessing if we're following God's instructions, but a curse if we're not. Most people who understand this advise others to move investments into safe havens, which will survive a stock market crash. This day also happens to be the day of the final blood moon of the Tetrad. Many are investing in silver. Ownership of gold will likely become against the law, as the government's going to confiscate it. The printed dollar is going to be worth nothing. So now, Rabbi Jonathan Cahn is a Messianic Jewish rabbi. He's a Jew who believes in Jesus. Many Messianic Jews believe that instead of doing away with the instructions of the Torah, the Old Testament, we keep them and believe in Yeshua. Many still worship in Hebrew as Jews, praying 3 times a day, and just add Yeshua into the picture. This is how his followers worshipped. If you doubt me, open up your Bible. Look at it. Yeshua said he came only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. It wasn't until 10 years after his death Paul was sent to the Gentiles. They kept kosher. They were all Jews. Perhaps Luke was a convert, but most of them were all born Jews. They didn't eat pork, lobster, crab, catfish. They kept the 7th-day Sabbath, which God said was forever, and kept God's feast. And God said they were His. They were His Sabbath and His feast. They're not Jewish feasts. So everyone who wants to, follow His instructions ought to be following them. I can show you scriptures where in the future, when our Messiah comes, all will be required to keep them. Keeping them means that we're not to work on those days. They're days of rest dedicated to Him. So, the question comes up, are we going to be protected? I certainly hope we will be in these end times. I look at Revelation chapter 14, verse 12, where God's people are defined as those who keep God's commandments and exercise faith in Yeshua. You go ahead and look at Revelations chapter 12, verse 17, Why else would Satan attempt to make war with them in that verse? It says, the dragon was infuriated over the woman, who represents Israel, and went off to fight the rest of her children, the Jewish people. And it says specifically, those who obey God's commands and bear witness to Yeshua. We are promised God's protection in Deuteronomy 28 if we obey his commands, and curses if we do not. King David was protected miraculously throughout his life. I look at other verses like this one and hold out hope of protection. This is what the Lord Almighty says concerning those days. In those days, 10 people from all languages and all nations will take a firm hold of one Jew by the hem of his robe and say, let us go with you, because we have heard that God is with you. Zechariah 8:23. In that day the Lord will defend the inhabitants of Jerusalem. The one who is feeble among them in that day will be like David, and the house of David will be like God, like the angel of the Lord before them. Zechariah chapter 12 verse 8. You will likely, if you're interested in checking out a Messianic Jewish congregation, you'll likely find one close by if you look. Learning to keep God's instructions takes time, and it's not something you're going to accomplish overnight, so be patient. I would look for one led by a rabbi, although a pastor may be a good teacher. Make sure he speaks Hebrew and can read Hebrew. Greek is a bonus. Then you will know he's genuine, and he's going to know God's instructions. Okay? The words in your Bible have been twisted in translation to represent the traditions of men. My uncle asked me, when is God's next mean streak? Okay? So if I'm going to put a label on a date, I'm going to say September 13th, 2015 is most likely not going to be a good day. The last blood moon of the Tetrad and the Shemitah both fall on that day. To quote Pastor Mark Biltz, it is like God put a quotation marks on in red on his calendar. We may see a total collapse of our economy. I don't know that for certain. I expect to warm up as we draw closer to the date. I pray I am wrong. I pray people will turn away from their sin. These days people don't even know what is sin in the first place. Well, they're so accepting of it, and they don't read their Bibles anymore. People don't know what sin is. So let me give you a few examples. Participating in or advocating for abortion, gay marriage, pornography, pedophilia, prostitution, abusing others, lying, cheating, stealing. I'm telling you, open up that book. Open up your Bible. Turn back to God. No one is exempt. Indeed, there is not a righteous man or woman on earth who continually does good and who never sins. That's from Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verse 20. But each one of us can pray and ask to be forgiven. Yeshua did leave a sinless life and willingly lay down his life for each of us. So he paid the penalty for our breaking the law. He didn't do away with it. Just like a father paying for a son's traffic ticket, the debt is paid, it's canceled, but the law is not annulled. Every day I ask God to forgive me because daily I fail him, but he never fails me. I ask him to help me to not repeat my sins, and gradually he helps me to lead a cleaner life, more in line with his purposes. He's helped me, and he can and will help you too. Just ask him. Okay, I'm going to leave a note in the comments section underneath the bottom of this video, so you can link to the WorldNet Daily site if you're interested in either Pastor Biltz's or book and CD set or Rabbi Jonathan Kahn's, and certainly look them up and check them out for yourself. God bless and shalom.